Our first speaker today is presenting managing patch policies and rubrics to make your organization more secure. Please, without any further ado, welcome Tom Bridge.
Thank you so much. It's so thrilling to be back at Penn State virtually this year. And we're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to my heart, which are patch management and patch policies, generally speaking. Patch management and patching applications and operating systems is a really critical part of the MacAdmins life. And making sure that your organization is properly set up for success and balancing risk against reward will give you the best possible experience, not just for your life, but for your end users. So I just want to thank everybody at Penn State for putting on this conference again this year. And it's so thrilling to be here today. We're going to talk a little bit about an agenda here first. And really what I want to explain is, what's a rubric? It's a weird word, although not for any of you who happen to be in education. The other question is, why should I use one? The third question is, who should have input on all of this? What's the right amount of detail associated with a given rubric? And then we're going to put it all together at the end in a way in which your organization can learn from this process and execute based on it. So at the beginning, what is a rubric? And so if you really think about something for a second, it's a 6-sided cubes and all. Nope, that's a Rubik's Cube. That's a little bit different. A rubric is something different entirely. It is from the Latin rubrica, or red ochre. Put simply, it's a set of criteria for grading assignments. Rubrics usually contain evaluative criteria, quality definitions, and for those criteria at particular levels of achievement, and a scoring strategy. So it sounds an awful lot like grading an exam. If we think about the time that we spend testing software, we are giving it an exam. We are running it through an upgrade process. We're deciding, okay, did it succeed in upgrading the operating system? Great. You didn't fail. That's tremendous. Do things still work after the update is complete? You could grade that on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of, hey, this really worked, or, oh man, everything caught fire and now I am sad. When you think about rubrics from the perspective of an IT admin, it's really about building an assessment tool. And that's why I wanted to include the second definition from University of Waterloo. A rubric is an assessment tool that clearly indicates achievement criteria across all the components of any kind of student work, from written to oral to visual. It can be used for marking assignments, class participation, or overall grades. Well, none of us really enjoyed seeing all that red ink on our papers when we were kids, but that's the sort of work that we have to do now to make this a process that can live and go forward and be executed on within your organization. So before we get to doing all of that work, let's talk about why red ochre or rubric is what we're looking at. And of course, it's all the fault of a bunch of monks from the 13th century. Rubric is Latin for red ochre, as we said, which was used in liturgical books to provide the officiant of a service a set of instructions to follow for worship. Not words to be read aloud, of course, but instead directions to complete the guide, directions to complete, to guide their flock through the actions. As from the early days of the church, traditions have mattered. And so while I'm not saying that we all need to be a robe-wearing monk class of IT admins, I'm certainly not saying that, but we can learn from our past and adopt operations that are successful for the future. This process of building a rubric or a red line for your organization's patch policies is really, really important. So when it comes to rubrics, we've got to think about 3 things. Rubrics are dependable. Rubrics are repeatable. And most importantly, for all of you solo admins out there, rubrics are not dependent just on you. Organizations have so many different challenges when it comes to patch management, not to mention the fact that certain applications require a great deal of expertise to operate. We had to support RStudio for a number of different clients over the years, and you could sit me down in front of RStudio and I can say, yes, that is indeed a computer application that turns text into something else, but I'll be damned if I can understand what it is. When it came time to evaluate whether or not RStudio had successfully updated, I could tell you if it launched. I couldn't tell you what it did after that. IT organizations need to have some sort of partnership with their users to identify what is problematic versus what is excellent. And so as a result, what we want to provide for you is a rubric for testing that lets not just you grade, but lets your organization handle these kind of things together with your power users who are going to understand the applications that they're using every day in ways that IT departments will not. Key application suites such as Adobe Creative Suite, such as RStudio and other statistical packages like SPSS will provide you with all manner of challenges as IT professionals, not to mention licensing, operational authentication against multiple different kinds of directories. There are all sorts of things that you may want to test on that you might not necessarily know the right results of. So as a result, rubrics allow you to pass part of this task off to qualified users. And as a result, what you get out of the experience is a much more repeatable and dependable process that doesn't require necessarily IT. So what do you need to know out of all of these kind of tests? And here I think that what you really want to know more than anything else is, will it blend? Does it blend? Did it install? Does it launch after install? Can it save stuff? Does it talk to the right services? Can your coworker use the app the way that they should? And so when you start to think about developing your rubrics for testing, it's going to give you the ability to essentially assemble a checklist, to essentially build a tool that will help other people in your organization help you evaluate this process. Checklists matter. And so, if we're looking at how to manage the rubrics that you're going to use, you need to be able to provide traceability for issues in your organization. You need to be able to document when there are problems. And in specific, when you're evaluating the functionality of a piece of software, this also gives you a really great piece of data at license renewal time. If you're going through the process of talking with anybody who spends a lot of money for software, and I think here of the Ekahau's of the world, the large expensive licenses that we have to pay for as IT admins. If you can say, hey, by the way, your software product just isn't terribly quality when it comes to updating itself, or it has real problems after update, or your workflows don't work with new versions of the software, providing that traceability and being able to demonstrate with data that, hey, you've got a real problem here and you need to handle this situation, or I would like a hefty discount for having to troubleshoot your problem for you. This is a great way to argue for those kind of things based on your own good data. It is very difficult for organizations to argue with the data that you provide. In addition, providing excellent checklists means that lets you cover test use cases clearly and succinctly in an accountable way. This step failed on step 4A of this particular procedure, that I was expecting this result and I didn't have that result. So when we think about those kind of things, clearly, it's all about building good test coverage within your own organization. The other part that's really important about a rubric is that you have processes that you own as an IT team, whether you're a team of one or a team within a team, that this is a process that you can own from end to end and that you can use to provide a repository of results that your end users will trust, so that they can know, yes, this has been through 2 layers of testing before it has arrived down at the end user. There is nothing worse than delivering a faulty update out to a group of users and then they never trust another update ever again, especially if it eats their work, especially if it damages their workflows, especially if it does it under a certain amount of time pressure that provides problems for you in the future. So that leads us to, what are you trying to prevent? Because patching too late leaves you insecure, and patching too soon can result in that lost productivity that we were talking about. And we have to recognize that there are two different kinds of environments here. Broken software, which is patching too soon, that can make resumes. Yours, as a matter of fact. And then broken security, which is patching too late, can also make resumes for the exact same reason. As admins, we are constantly in this battle, trying to live in the sweet spot of not patching too soon and not patching too late for security and functionalities reasons. But as a result, what we really need to try and figure out is, what's the best way to look at this? Lucas Hall is a phenomenal MacAdmin and taught me about ADRs. And in a Penn State talk, as a matter of fact, several years ago. And so ADRs, or architectural decision records, are a good opportunity to take a framework into your rubric and start to evaluate it. So what's an ADR? And I'll make sure that this presentation is posted so you can go to this lovely link, which I may actually, if I'm brave, try doing right now. It's a GitHub repo. For an ADR organization. Architectural decisions are software design choices, which sound very similar to IT design choices in terms of functional and non-functional requirements that are architecturally significant. If you pick up an application, if you drop an application, if you trade one application for another, if you're figuring out whether or not a major version of an application is right for you, this is a great framework for having a set of decisions, talking about the choices that are involved, and coming to conclusions in a written way that you can document in such a way that your procedures develop structure that you can depend upon. One of the great brands of notebooks out there that I love is called Field Notes. They're these small notebooks, and one of their key items is, I'm writing it down to remember it now, not so I can remember it later, not just so I can remember it later. And using things like ADRs is a great way to develop a set of procedures that you can write it down to remember it now and think through the process clearly and concisely, and to go through that entire process safely and soundly for your organization. Nothing is more important than the IT structure that you, as the IT practitioner and professional, provide to your team. Nothing is more important than that, because it's what allows you to make good decisions safely for the long-term future of your organization. I mean, I love to talk about, moving fast and breaking things, because there's certainly something to be said about not talking through every single decision. And every single minor point release of macOS, for example, may not need a full regression analysis within your organization. However, you are going to want to test key tools every time you upgrade. So when it comes to a sample rubric, I wanted to provide this document, which is the result of a markdown document that will be included on my website, tombridge.com, for later operation. But what we wanted to provide here was 5 major areas. I wanted a set of metadata that was around the testing of the operating system itself, data to test, operating systems versions that are tested. If you're supporting N-1, you can test it on Monterey and Big Sur. If you're supporting N-2, you can do it for Monterey, Big Sur, and Catalina. You will also want to track the product that you're testing, the previous version that you were testing of it, a tested version, that you're working on right now, and the update method that you use to do that update. Updates that are delivered via automated methods may be different than automated updates that are provided through the onboard updater utility that's supplied with software. Handling your kind of test case will also affect the kind of results that you get. You're also going to want to have the IT tests. Hey, does it launch? Does it open a document? Can I edit that document and save it? What's the display rendering look like on this particular document? Does it match about what I was expecting, or is it vastly different? Is this a major update? Am I going to have to spend some time educating my end users about it? These are the kind of questions that you're going to be asking yourself, that you're going to be documenting in your rubric. As a part of this, you're also going to want to establish power user tests for your application for that very interesting RStudio case that I discussed. A task description, identifying the tester so that you can know that, hey, by the way, George in accounting is going to test this, as is Lisa in finance. And that they have very different responsibilities and they have similar test procedures, but they may have slightly different results. You may also want to supply an opportunity for them to comment on the test. Yes, this update worked perfectly. No, I don't like where they put the new palette. Those are feedback items that you can take back to your partners in the product division of whatever program you're using. In addition, you may have security review required. Does this application work with the VPN after the fact? Does it survive update and still work with my EDR or my XDR tool? Are there other security tools that are compatible with or other security tools in your organization that you need to be concerned about the compatibility of the tool? And then last but not least, you need to provide a sign-off of a directly responsible individual within your organization who can work as your point contact if there are future problems with that update. You'll notice that I didn't say take the blame if something goes wrong, because that's not how good organizations operate. Directly responsible individuals aren't there to take blame. They are there to provide responsibility for returning that application to the good working order within your organization. This is not about blame. This is all about being responsible. So, who should have input into your rubric? And I think that this is important for you to recognize that there's going to be a little bit of an overlap between all of those things. Here, I think that your top 3 people are your info security folks, your power users, and your IT operations professionals. You may have other stakeholders within your organization who have to weigh in on this, whether those are compliance officers that are separate from IT and security, or process individuals that handle the engineering processes that are associated with these individual pieces of software. Make sure that you're thinking about this clearly and concisely in such a way that you can document why people are involved clearly, succinctly, and in such a way that the future self, even if it's not you, will have a good understanding of why you're doing what you're doing. So what's the right amount of detail here? And I think that this is going to be a balance for every organization that's out there in terms of determining what the right kind of leadership is within your IT platform and your IT operation. And so establishing a good set of criteria is all about sometimes whether you pass or fail a test. Sometimes it's about establishing detail. Sometimes it's about doing a checklist kind of operation. But really what it comes down to is don't overthink it. Don't spend too many times shaving the yak to make your rubric appropriate. Don't overthink it. Start with the big things that you care about, and you need to track those. In addition, you've got to keep your records to track those decisions, whether or not that's done with an ADR or whether that's done with a formal process or an informal process that's, for example, handled through Slack or through email or through another tool like Microsoft Teams. Whatever you do, use your track record to provide detailed notes to your management to basically say, this is the percentage of updates that we have done within our organization to provide good updates. 95% of our updates were successful with 0% problems within our organization. It's probably not going to be that high to start. That's okay. But providing good track records here gives you good records to justify the behaviors that you really want to emphasize inside your organization, which is staying in lockstep within your individual patch policies. Last but not least, you want to make sure that whatever process you standardize on, it should be generic, it should be functional, and it should be repeatable. It should not require one person to go through the entire part of that process all alone by themselves. That's going to be the only thing you do. For the key applications inside your organization, you really want to focus on that generic, functional, and repeatable action so that they can get through these processes quickly in such a way that they're going to handle that appropriately and have it not take over their entire life. Now, everybody who's out there who's thinking about all of this right now is going to anticipate the next slide, and they're going to say, Tom, this sounds a whole lot like change management. Well, guess what it is? A lot of IT is change management. You'll notice here that I haven't made any prescriptions for specific amounts of time in your policies or specific percentages of sharding for use within your monkey instance. That's because that's for you as the organization to make up those decisions. I will say that Microsoft has, with their new patch product, said that you really ought to do this in a 1, 5, 10, and 100% circle, so that you're testing with 1% of your end users, 5% of your end users, 10% of your end users, and then deploy to the rest of your fleet. That's a perfectly fine option to take if that's how your organization wants to approach it. Whatever you do, I'm encouraging you to take the change management route. Not through any formal, deeply, structured process. But what I'm going to say is you need to have a process for your organization. Is it full ITIL? Maybe. Is it not? You get to choose. But what I'm saying is have a process and abide by it. And with that, I'll say thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And I think that we've got some conversations to have around Q&A. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tom. That's fantastic. Let's open it up to Q&A and see what questions come in here. If you're just joining us, we're using the Q&A feature of the Teams live event. So feel free to add any Q&A in there that you have. Currently, we have no Q&A at the moment.
Apparently, I answered everyone's questions about how to perfectly patch your environment. And I did it all in just 20 minutes. No, that's probably not accurate. But I'm happy to take questions, comments, and heckling from the crowd.
Bring it on, crowd. Heckling. Well, give it another minute here and see if perhaps the questions are just quite long. Here we go. Here's Bruce saying, not a question, but just wanted to thank Tom for both this and the powerful post on his website.
Thank you, Bruce. There is a question about which model Mac is behind me. That is an original 512. Awesome. The nifty banner was a custom operation. Talk to me privately, and I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Good information, Tom. Thanks. From Anonymous.
We have another question from Elliot. Where does your org draw the line for applying the, quote, needing full regression testing method?
That's a really good question. It's going to be different for every organization. I actually don't work in IT anymore. I work over in the product division, so I cannot speak on behalf of our Jump Cloud IT operation. I would generally say you probably want to do it at least twice a year, and figuring out how you go from there. I think that we have just started the beta cycle, right? Ventura is now in beta. Beta 1 is great. Have you tested it yet? I've been spending a little bit of time with it and trying to kick the tires to understand how it's going to affect my own workflow. And so I was going to say you're probably going to want to test on the major version, which would be in this case 13.0.1, and go to town from there. And I think that's a pretty great way to approach it. So give that a try. And then I think that it's going to be different for everybody. How people settle on it. Somebody might want to do a full regression of security tools every time you push a minor version of the operating system. Hey, is my machine still reporting into Falcon? Is it reporting in, does my VPN still work? Those are key things that you're going to need to evaluate in terms of like, what's the key item here that you actually have to do it?
All right, well, we just got another fun slew of questions in. First one is from Anonymous, says, great presentation. Are there recommended ways of getting ownership buy-in to, quote, own not blame?
I would say continued employment is a great way to make sure that you have own not blame. You will have a hard time keeping your staff if you're just going to blame them for somebody's third-party problem. However, you can definitely figure out what's the right strategy here to adopt new updates and stay within the security boundaries. I think it's all about figuring out how to treat your people appropriately. We're all supposed to be working with adults, right? who have responsibility, who can engage in those kind of things. And I think managing up to make sure that, people understand, hey, these are people who work in IT, not machines. And people can make mistakes, and people can essentially, and those people who make mistakes don't just work for your organization. They might work for, I think that, I'm not going to pick on Microsoft, but they had a big problem in January with one of their major patches for Windows, where the PPTP VPN stopped working after the patch was applied. And that was a human error. Human error is going to happen. Essentially, what you're responsible for is you got to own what's yours. Yes, I delivered that update. And you've got to say, yep, I'm really sorry. We can roll it back. We're going to do that process now. Here's how we're going to do it. Owning the human part of the process is absolutely critical.
Awesome. Fun question from Terrence. Would you recommend those AirPods?
Wholeheartedly. I tried them on in the Apple Store probably over a year ago now, and I actually said a bad word out loud in the middle of the Apple Store because they were so comfortable. They're very comfortable. The noise canceling is very good. They're very good monitors. I like them a lot.
Awesome. The next comes from Anonymous, who says, thanks, Tom. We'll have to digest the resources you provided to come up with our rubric. Is that a live metro map behind you?
It is a live map of the London Underground. You can find it at traintracker.io.
Excellent.
Tracker
another
with no
question?
E in it.
Tracker with no E. Yes. Another question from Anonymous. Do you have any suggestions for how to get stakeholders to participate in this process? In some cases, they seem to view it as extra work.
It is extra work. There's no way to get them to not view it as extra work. What you need is buy-in. And buy-in is all about reliability and helping your coworkers. These tasks don't have to be detailed. What they have to be is covering the important parts of your workflows. So that if you create documents through scripting processes, if you have print drivers that are special, I'm thinking here of binary controllers, and I'm sorry to use the F word on Penn State's live stream here. But those are the kind of things that you're going to have to test to make sure that you can deploy those kind of software products. Yes, it is more work. But you get them to carve it out, and you go to their manager and say, hey, I really need 30 minutes a week from this person to help shore up our IT processes because they know way more about the software than I do. And if I have to be the one evaluating it, it's very likely that there may be bugs that slip through.
Excellent. I have another question. I think the low number of questions is because the session relay leads to a number of jumping off points. So tons to explore. Thanks, Tom, from Anonymous. But our next one is somewhat off topic from Drew. But which platforms do you love to use to, quote, do, also known as document your rubrics? Trello, Atlassian, Google Sheets, especially for a small organization of, say, 20 staffers and 100 Macs.
Trello's awesome. The the templated versions of those cards that you can build is such a power move, especially when you figure you can also use auto package to drive that kind of stuff. And that's really, really helpful. So awesome stuff there. I'm really excited about that. Awesome. Any tips for automating tests of on the rubric? There are ways to do those things. I'm not the expert in that space. There are tools like Sakuli, tools that sorry, I'm blanking on the name. Selenium are great ways to evaluate the contents of screens. And so those may be helpful to that, and that would be great.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for questions today.
Thanks, everybody. This was great fun.
Really appreciate it, Tom. I'm going to say if there's any other additional questions, please reach out to Tom Bridge through his website or the Slack channel, PSU Mac, on MacAdmins.org Slack, where you are going.
See you all there.
Thank you. Josh, do you want to take us out?
Yep. Once again, we're going to thank Tom for taking the time to deliver the first session today.